like to introduce you guys to Michaela Kate Schaefer. She is passionate to see you and your business reach its full potential. As a leadership coach, she loves working with companies to see generations come together and increase communication and collaboration in order that they can achieve their very best. She's a speaker, she's an author, a coach. Michaela has invested 15 years in developing men and women into leaders from fresh out of college to much farther in their career. So today, Michaela is going to cover kind of a little webinar for us, the 7 flags of workplace burnout and creating team culture that you want. Um, uh, this is kind of a little write up that she has. We spend the majority of our days, we work with our majority of our days with our coworkers, which is why it's all the more important to create great culture among the team. These 7 watch points are also key areas to master so that your team can come to work with joy, energy, and drive to keep improving. In this session, we're going to unpack topics like communication, hiring, conflict resolution, and more to allow you space to evaluate your own team and decide where you might need to adjust and begin your shift in culture. So, Michaela, I would like to turn it over to you and really looking forward to what you've got to tell us.
Yeah, you got it. Thanks for the introduction.
Very
And
well.
yeah, I recognize a few faces. It's been a little while since I've been in the ING world again, but fun to be back and see some of you again. Anthony, you're hired to mow my lawn, and Vern, I was in the Sweet 16 in Chicago, so we didn't get to the final four, but close. So really quick, just those of you who don't know me, I grew up in Iowa. Went to Iowa State, big Iowa State Cyclones fan. If you want to talk to me all day long, talk to me about that. Big sports fan. But anyway, graduated from marketing. Ended up, rather than going to sports marketing, I ended up going into full-time ministry. So I was in ministry for about 7 years. Part of those 7 years, I was in England at a church over there with their college young adults group. Kind of got tired of the accent and the food, and so came back to the States, where I live now in Pawleys Island, South Carolina. So close to some of you, but I realized when I came back, what I loved to do was what I was doing in the church, which was coaching, training, discipleship, was a part of a lot of larger churches that did a lot of leadership development. And so was kind of had that foundation in my background, and now work with teams and individuals. And I kind of say I work with people problems and people potential. So I either get people that come to me because they're like, Joe and Sally, they don't work well together, or they just want to invest in their team. And so, yeah, what brings us here today is a topic we're going to dive into. Hopefully, none of you feel burnout, and that's why you're here today, but hopefully, we can address some things to avoid that, to maybe avoid it with your team. And so, these are kind of my 7 red flags of workplace burnout that I've seen. Okay, there's probably more. You might have your own list, but these are ones that I would say I regularly see within teams, within individuals that I'm coaching. And so feel free to throw out other ones. Let this be as interactive. Throw your questions in the chat. Um, and we'll kind of go from there. So the first most important question is, who do you have winning the Masters? Put it in the chat. I'm Jordan Spieth all the way. Okay. So that's out of the way. Next, we'll get into the meat of it. How do you know that you're in a toxic workplace that might be prone to burnout? What are the signs? So think for a second. When I just say red flags of workplace burnout, what come to some of your minds right away? What things, what issues, what challenges? Throw that in the chat. Scotty, yep, not Tiger. Yep. What are some of your things that you're like, this is when I know burnout is happening, might happen, throw the red flag up. What might they be? So kind of think withholding communications, gossip. Yep, that's a good one. Toxic employees, good one. We'll get to that. Burnout happens when I complain to my spouse more than brag about what is happening. Yep. Yeah, usually oftentimes I see it too where the people around you can recognize it sooner than you can, right? Maybe just by your attitude, your behavior. Maybe you're quiet when you're normally pretty chatty. That's a good one. Making decisions without including people. Yep, that's a good one. So good. So keep them flowing. So I'm just gonna dive into these 7 areas, and as I go through them, I might be kind of posing questions for you to kind of think as well as feel free to do your best to kind of evaluate which one might be a watch point for you. Because I find some people have certain ones that are like, man, that is really important to me, or I need to make sure I avoid that, or that's kind of a default I need to watch for as a leader, as a team. So just kind of be making it on that. So the first one is a lack of recognition. If you have a boss, a team that does not do a good job of affirming, confirming like who you are, right? We all want to be seen, we want to be heard, we want to be known. And so if those things aren't happening where you don't feel seen, you don't feel heard, you don't feel known, man, that is, I mean, who wants to show up to that job, to that boss? And we say it all the time, right? I just had a meeting with 2 of the coaches on my team, and our takeaway from our conversation was, again, you've heard it. People don't leave job companies, right? They leave bosses. And so to be that leader, to be that boss that's regularly affirming, hey, good job. I saw that. I appreciate the extra mile. So to think about for you as a leader, when was the last time you told your team, good job, way to go? As well as, do you have structures in place that prompt you to do that? I had a leader once that literally every Friday he had a calendar prompt that was like, who do I need to tell good job? Right. And it seems like I shouldn't have to prompt myself, but it was like that was an important value that he wanted to create with his team. And also to think about, do you have both structures of informal and formal processes to give regular feedback? So do you have, something where you're like regularly sending a thank you note, hey, good job on that. And then also, what does your performance review structure look like? I mean, I've had a team recently that finally, they're a new company, 5 years old, but they finally put in yearly performance reviews. So if that's not happening, that's and I encourage at least if you do it twice a year. So there's this sense of like I'm getting feedback, I'm telling them, what's to be expected. There's that constant engagement. And so that's number one is just a lack of a recognition. Nobody wants to show up to the job where they don't feel like they're valued, and they don't matter. Number 2 is constant change in work expectations. And so it can feel so deflating, defeating if you show up in a job where you're putting in all this effort and then they're like, oh no, it's this way. Oh no, it's that way. That the clarity around expectations are constantly changing, adjusting, because I heard this recently that said expectations give people a sense of stability, security, peace, and structure. And so, as much as we're creatures of habit, right? We actually crave that sense of security, of structure, of peace, of like, I know what I'm getting into come Friday, come Monday. Yes, you're going to have shifting of deadlines and priorities and, hey, this new project, of course. But if there is not this clear expectation around who am I working with? What are they expecting of me? What is this department expecting of me, right? Is this, I mean, little things of like, is this a video call or a phone call? All of those things matter. And I see this especially, I'll say, with out of the gate hiring, like to think about how well you do setting expectations out of the gate hiring. It's wild to me how often someone gets hired for a job and 3 months in they're like, I don't know what I'm doing, right? Like well, now I'm doing this. Like they said I was hired for that, right? Like and that, I mean, talk about a sense, a lack thereof, of peace, security, of feeling like, what is, what date is it? Who am I working with? What's expected? So that's number two. Number three, lack of work-life boundaries. So who of you has had a boss that emailed you, called you, texted you at any hour of the day, any hour of the week? Uh-oh, Anthony. So Anthony, give us since you raised your hand, give us a little taste of like how was it? How did it make you feel? I see you already took a big breath there.
Yeah. Well, it was infuriating. It was a small family-run business. I was working for the son, so it was a father-son, and I worked for the son. And
Okay.
he literally felt like he could call me anytime, night or day, 7 days a week, and literally he would call me at midnight, and it would be just a thought. I mean, literally, he had had a thought and he was afraid he was going to forget. So he needed to call and tell me these things. And it was exceptionally frustrating.
Yeah. How can I ask, how did you handle it then?
Finally had to have a deep
Yeah,
conversation with him. And then I couldn't shut my phone off because I had clients that needed to be able to reach me if,
sure.
something was going
Yeah,
on. But I
yeah,
stopped taking his calls after 8 p.m.
yeah,
So, yeah.
yeah. Anybody else? I can't see everybody at once here for some reason, but anybody else have that situation? Hopefully not currently. If they're on the call, just raise your hand. Maybe they'll get the hint. Maybe don't do that. Right. Have the hard conversation, like Anthony. But no, I have a situation with one of my clients like this right now, where everybody on the team knows. I mean, I've even had to put up a boundary with this person, like after 8 o'clock, don't answer that call, right? After 6 o'clock, you can guarantee nothing productive is going to happen if you answer that call. And so. It's tricky because we live in such a time where everything's constant interaction and there's so much connection that could be had between emails, texts, phone calls, if you use Slack or IM of some sort, right, on Microsoft Teams or whatever it be. It's like you can feel like I can never be not available, right? I can never be not reachable. And this, I would say to me, is the top of the list of how are you protecting your time, energy, what you give your attention to, um, is so important. Talking about the Masters, I was just listening to Scotty Scheffler interview for you, Scotty fans. And he said, when I'm home, I forget what the question was, something about balance. And he said, when I'm home, I'm home. And basically, he said, presence is a skill. Like when I'm home, I'm home. I don't take the golf course with him. It might be easier. You can't take maybe your clubs in the house. His wife wouldn't allow that. If the number one golfer in the world can figure out a way to shut it off and shut it down and protect his, physical, mental, emotional energy, I think this I see as the top two areas of burnout of leaders I work with is also your ability to be present wherever you're at. And so I've seen where leaders like they have a process driving home where they're like turning it off, right? Where they're closing one door, right? Okay, now I'm home. I've seen it where the first 30 minutes, a leader has put their phone in a drawer. So it's like almost that physical act where you tell your body, your mind, like, hey, I'm home now. I'm with my kids now. I'm with whoever it might be, right? And so I think this is a big one, as well as I'll say, if you, for you as a leader to lead out in. And so an example I give with this is I had a leader who, working with the whole team, and the team was like, she'll email at us at like midnight, or some days it's 4 a.m. Like, and so you put that expectation automatically, right, on your team of like, and I get it. Sometimes it's the nature, or if you're traveling. So she though heard that feedback and started to then just schedule the emails to go out at like 8 a.m., 9 a.m., right? Using those things where you're setting the example of like, they're going to follow in your footsteps as a leader of what's expected or what they feel like is expected. So this is a big one. That boundaries around, your time off, paid time off, taking vacations. Are you off on vacation, right? Are you checking in? If you're checking in with your team on vacation, they're going to feel like they need to check in on vacation. So what really quick, any thoughts with this one? Because I think it's a big one. I think it is a huge watch point in the world we live in with constant access. Any quick thoughts or questions or yes or amens to this one?
Yeah, I'm seeing that at home with my wife. So she's a director, so she's a high level employee at a large organization in Indianapolis, and both her boss and I had a conversation
Oh,
outside of work, and
right,
we're both trying to get her to slow down.
right.
Because I think this constant, I don't want to say nagging, but the constant drain on her, be pulling up
Hmm.
many different directions after 5 o'clock, after 8 o'clock, at 4 in
Yeah,
the morning or whenever. I,
yeah,
Tom will like this analogy. I've told her it's like running at an 800 pace speed for a track
fair,
star, right? At 800
right,
pace, but the race is at 3,200.
right.
Eventually, you're going to have that burnout, like what we were
Burnout.
talking about.
Yep,
You're not going to be able to
yep,
finish the race. You're going to either quit, find new employment, or
yeah,
something worse. So
yeah,
you got to allow yourself to run at a 3,200 speed, not
yeah,
at 800 speed.
yeah. Anybody else like want to brag on themselves too of like takeaways or things they've learned the hard way or throw it in the chat, things that you do to protect your time.
One of mine is, and I'm older, and Vern was alluding to the running, is I refuse to run with a cell phone. So no matter how far I'm
Oh,
going, and my daughter's a
love
psychology
that.
grad, and she says that's probably
Ah,
the healthiest thing I do all week is
right.
I take zero electronics with me when I run.
That's good.
So
Really
I
good.
love podcasts, I love books, but I won't even do those on a run.
Yeah, I love that. That's really good. Well, yeah, throw your comments, your thoughts in the chat. The other piece of this one I'll add real quick too. This is the danger. I keep adding things. It's like a 20-point checklist. Is your ability to truly know yourself, right? As a leader, like your self-awareness around, you know, I often do this with leaders that I say, these are the red flag is starting to go up, watch points of like for me, I know when I'm getting angry at random strangers in the grocery store, I've maybe hit my limit, right? Like if I'm angry at the guy like picking out cereal for no reason, like there's probably something I need to address, right? So anger for me is always a like, oh, okay, I need to slow down, I need a journal, I need to like go hit my punching bag, right? So that self-awareness as a leader is huge. All right, number four, keep it moving here. One of my, probably why I'm employed still today and doing this as a job, toxic employees, toxic work environment. So who have you have been a part of, hopefully not too many of you, been a part of a toxic work environment? It's not fun. I say nothing zaps morale faster than a toxic employee, than a toxic team, toxic leader. Um, as well as with that, nothing zaps, I find, team morale faster than having low performance, inappropriate, leaders, toxic, whatever, and then a leadership that provides no accountability for those things. That to me is really actually the root, I find, of what creates burnout, your good people to leave, is that when there's no healthy, strong leadership that will take accountability and provide consequences for the toxic people, for the low performers, that you look over and you're like, well, they can get away with anything they want, right? No, nobody seems to care. We're all over here doing their work, or we're actually showing up on time, and there's no accountability around those individuals, the kind of culture that you actually kind of want. And so that's what I kind of always say. If you find yourself in a toxic environment where I've had to coach people around, do I stay? Do I go? And often the question I we dig into is there any hope that they'll have accountability for these individuals and that something will change? Because if not, I mean, I've encouraged people, I think you're best to leave. The other piece of it is amazing to me, on the other end, coaching leaders to finally get a backbone and put in some consequences and maybe write somebody up or whatever it might be. Is it's amazing to me when those people end up usually either opting off the island or getting voted off the island, how quickly morale increases, how much energy they realize that person was taking, both to them personally and the team. And then often how quickly some of the silent team members will speak up and be like, thank God. So this one is sneaky. It can be sneaky. Um, but anybody, I guess, can, if you feel comfortable sharing, like, or in the past, if you've had like just what you notice with toxic environments, culture, anything that has kind of stuck out to you or maybe got you burnout as well.
Okay, I
Anybody?
can I can share a little bit because that's what my comment was at the beginning.
Oh, okay. I missed that. Sorry.
Around withholding communications. We had to let an entire team go because of a toxic leader on that team. And
Yeah.
it's on me and my business partner for making her a manager, but we just couldn't get a straight answer from her. And after a period
Okay.
of time,
Yeah.
we just realized she was poisoning that whole group, and they were doing less and less and less work,
Yep.
complaining more and more and more. It was an interesting phenomenon to watch.
Right. Right.
It was a relief, as you mentioned, when
Yeah.
they were out of the company for everybody else that
Yeah.
was with us.
What for you was kind of like the final straw or last straws that you're like, wow, this.
When we got so we're virtual.
Okay. Yeah.
Like a lot of companies during COVID,
Sure.
we decided
Yeah.
to stay virtual at this point, but
Mm.
we didn't have the mechanisms in place to really measure productivity. And when we got those systems stood up and were able to look at the data,
Hmm.
their complaints and their productivity, there was an entire person, it was like 100 and some hours
Wow.
every week that we were paying for and not getting production from. And so when
Wow.
you put the data there, it's
Yeah.
kind of
The
obvious.
numbers
Yeah.
don't lie. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
They've been crying wolf, and And it
Sure.
was, yeah.
Yeah.
But
Um,
real quick on that, it really is tough to spin out of that. I had a department in 3.5 hours from my home that I was responsible for to some extent. And finally, I just made the joke tongue in cheek. Unfortunately, I got back to the whole department. Is that it had become such a cancer that when one person left, that we'd bring in a new person, and that new person would then become toxic. And
mhm.
then to William's point, at one point, I just again made the joke we didn't do it, but it's like we almost need to fire everybody and start from
Yeah.
scratch because we were just ruining lives very systematically.
Mm.
And we did get a handle on it eventually, but it would have been quicker to have done it that way.
Yeah. Yeah.
So anyway, so to William's point,
Yeah.
it's very tough, but
Well, the hard part is too, sometimes it's like you can't figure out who's maybe the source and who's maybe just very influential and needs a solid leader and who maybe is just also in their own right a bit toxic. And yeah, it's
yeah.
the thing I always say is, and I stole this from somebody, behavior is a language, right? Because a lot of times I'll have leaders that are very compassionate. Oh, they said they're going to change, or oh, they're saying all the right things, right? But I mean, at the end of the day, I kind of don't care if they're sorry, if they cried. Behavior is the language, and if they're not going to change their behavior or what's expected or required, it's it is but is what it is kind of from there. But that's the whole topic. I've kind of grown to love a bit, oddly. So I could go on and on with toxic people. But anyone else real quick on this, or we'll get questions at the end too overall. But um yeah, so it moves me into number five. It kind of goes together, the high turnover rates. If you have a team, a company that you're just constantly turning people over, it's exhausting. The uncertainty, you're always then maybe having to do a little more, a little extra. You're having to then train new people all the time. And so the thing I see with this one again, because I always like to get to more of the root of maybe the issue, the problem. The thing I see with high turnover is leaders that aren't able to I really identify the source of the high turnover. Because we know it can be many things, right? It could be actually toxic employees that come in and they're like, whoa, I don't want to work with her, right? And then they're out the door. It could be bad training, bad onboarding. It could be there's not, back to the expectations, there's not clear expectations. It could be a limit in advancement opportunities. They get in there and they're realizing, like, so I gotta wait 10 years to my boss to retire. Like I wanna, do things, right? So there could be a lot of issues or reasons for high turnover. Um, and it's really being able to identify if that is a problem or issue that comes up, is what is the root cause. And it could be a many of things. So um, anyone see the high turnover as something they've ever dealt with or had to kind of tackle?
So, Doug
Yeah.
Goodwin from Cincinnati. That's actually one of the things that we focus on, like on a weekly basis with our clients. Turnover is the number one thing that gets us in the door.
Sure.
And I just
Right.
want to share this. It's just happened. We're working with a client right now, and they have an incredibly high turnover rate, but they also pay incredibly well. It's almost like they're paying higher just to get people to avoid the fact that they're
Right.
miserable. But as we've gone in and now analyzed this, a lot of their frontline managers are ex-military and they like ex-military, but the
Uh-huh.
challenge is military is chain of command. And when
Uh-huh.
it's safety, chain of command makes a lot of sense.
Sure.
Everything else they do, it makes zero sense. But they
Yeah.
haven't bridged the gap
Yeah.
to create a collaborative environment with their workers. And so they just keep turning them over left and right. So we're finally getting them to shine the light on that.
Interesting. Yeah. And then do you find too, it's the younger is it maybe older generation, ex-military, and the younger generations are like
Totally. 18 to 30, they're out the door.
Yeah, yeah,
They've got this huge retirement cliff coming and they don't have the backfill to cover.
right.
So it's kind
Wow.
of an emergency
Right.
situation.
Well, it
But
feels like, yeah, you have some good job security there
I think so.
with them. Yeah. Yeah, interesting. Anybody else with that one real quick? Um, all right, so the last two, we'll bring it home here, is a micromanagement of tasks. So a leader who is micromanaging. I mean, what burns you out more than someone who's constantly over your shoulder, asking you, how's that going? What you need help with? What about this? Right? And so the first piece of that, back to kind of that self-awareness piece, is to really, you as a leader, do you know? Because usually I find leaders either fall into the camp of like, here you go for it. And then you kind of never hear from again until 3 months later. And they're like, how's that going? Or the other camp of like checking in all the time, right? You give something only to maybe kind of take it back. So first and foremost, how do you feel like you are as a leader? Are you a fully let it go leader? Are you a, because usually even if you've grown to be someone who's gotten good at delegation, good at letting go, have regular check-ins in a healthy way, you probably still have a default of one or the other. And so how do you kind of, what's your default as a leader delegation wise? And then the other kind of piece of this micromanage that I see is, um, so much of delegation is around trust. Can have I put enough training in to trust you that when I give you this, I can trust you're going to go do it? So have I had enough training, had enough time with you that I not only trust who you are as a person, your character, but also your competency, that I've raised you up enough to go and do the things? And then have I put in an appropriate amount of structure to check in and follow through? Because no matter if you're a here you go, forget about it, or a constant kind of want to check, it's good to have a set structure of no, I need to check in 2 weeks. It's on the calendar. Now I won't forget. Or no, I need to wait 2 weeks and not, I'm gonna just shut my mouth and not check in and get all back in the details. So that I see so much of a micromanaging. The hard part is a lot of times you might have to be the one that has that conversation with your boss, on, hey, I feel like you give me something, but you don't actually empower me or release me to do that. That's kind of a whole nother thing, but often might need to happen as well. And then the last number seven, red flags, is shifting priorities. And I can send you a handout on all this too, guys. But shifting priorities is kind of back similar to the expectations. But thinking about, well, ask this question: do you know what are your top three priorities for the week, for the month, for the year? And then does your team know those same priorities for them? And it's amazing how often you might know them, but then they get changed, right? And then it's again, you're shifting priorities, you're shifting focus. Okay, one week it's this, the next week it's this. Another big thing I see with burnout is just, there's only so much information we can take, and focus is everything in our world with everything that's coming at us. And so making sure you have clarity around what are the top three things I need to be doing, because they're going to be getting emails from other departments and all the things, so that there's just a clarity around what's expected of me, what are my priorities, are they consistent? This is a conversation I often have to have with leaders that go back to their boss and say, okay, you gave me 5 more things this week. I only have time for 4. What do I put on the back burner. That often needs to happen a lot, I find, in conversations. So those are just my seven. I probably threw in three more in the midst of that. But I love to hear your questions, your thoughts, best practices, things you all are in it in as well. And so things you want to brag on about your team with any of these. Another one that you would throw out. Um, so I'll leave it to
So
you.
yeah, so I'm gonna jump in here.
Okay.
I'm gonna ask a few questions as I was taking notes. And Michaela, this was really, really, really good stuff, and I fully expected it would be. As you were talking about, burnout, my mind kind of went to, or let's go more to the toxic, the shifting priorities, and those things, right?
Yep.
We've got kind of employees in a business that are doing the work. We've got management in that business. And goal setting is something huge for me. So I work in sales management, and goal setting and creating process and metrics that say these are the things that you need to do are really, really important.
Yep.
So how is it best to help managers become better at creating that kind of culture that you want to avoid that
Mm.
toxic, environment and creating those situations in a business?
Yeah, great question. Because I mean, at the end of the day, I say people say leadership is influence, right? So how are you influencing your team to basically be at their best, create these structures? And then I kind of always add leadership is intentional influence. And so is I think of it. I'll use my basketball coach, Iowa State basketball coach, as an example. I think he's one of the best at creating culture. And so to me, that's kind of your question: is how do we
Yeah.
create this culture? And so they are diligent at creating a structure of discipline of this is what's expected, right? This is the times we practice. It's 6 a.m. It's every day. There's high structure and intentionality around everything that they do. And so that would be my charge to you all as a leader would be your team needs that structure, right? They need freedom comes when there's structure. And so if you can give them a sense of this is what's expected, these are the numbers I need every morning, this is when I expect communication from you. I'm going to lead in that way in terms of when I'm emailing you, when I'm giving you information, all the way down to like in a meeting, right? How are your meetings? Are they structured? Do you have an agenda? Is there a rhythm and a routine so that as well as how are you showing up? Like in those first 5 minutes, are you showing up? Hey, how's everybody's weekend? Right? You're also being the character that you want them to also be, right? When they go out to their clients. And so that's what I've seen, I would say, work the best is terms of a leader who just is highly influential and intentional about every little action and interaction that they have.
Okay.
That it's, if that makes sense. I don't
No,
know.
I think it does make sense. So, how important would you say that having, weekly or bi-weekly meetings with team members are for helping to promote, good culture versus creating that, that toxicity?
Yeah. I would say one of my kind of go-to best resources for meeting structure is Death by Meeting by Patrick Lencioni, if anybody's read that.
That's a good one.
I mean, all of Patrick Lencioni's are my kind of go-to for how to do leadership.
Yep.
And so I kind of live by his kind of four meeting structures. He has the quarterly, he has the monthly, and then kind of the weekly, bi-weekly, and then the daily check-in. And
Yeah.
so not every team needs those specific rhythms, but I think I would definitely if go back to his structure to that book. I can send out the PDF I use on that as well, to kind of see, because each meeting has a purpose. He references it into think about your entertainment. A 5 minute YouTube clip, right? It has a very specific purpose. A 30-minute Netflix show, very specific, like you're getting the nuts and bolts. A 2 hour Netflix binge, right, is different. And so he's saying, too often what we do in meetings is we put um a 2 hour movie, we try to jam it into a 45-minute meeting, right? And it's too much. We're all overwhelmed. And so, for sure, I would say, and actually, you make me want to change my list because meetings to me I often what I do when I work with teams out of the gate is I ask if I can sit in on a couple meetings and just observe because I can really quickly identify a whole lot of things by the nature of how your meetings operate. Who leads them? What does that look like?
Yeah.
What is the flow like? And so, man, if you want one homework, I would say go back and do a deep dive on your team's meetings and their effectiveness.
Yeah, no, I think that's good. And any of you that have not dove into the world of Patrick Lencioni, highly, highly suggested. All of the books are absolutely great. So I see a few folks have had to drop off. So before anybody else starts
Yeah.
having to bounce, you guys, what questions or comments would you guys like to make with regard to what you just heard?
All right, not a question, but for anybody that is feeling burnout, I would encourage you to don't wait. Just for your own mental health. One of my favorite expressions, if you can't change your people, change your people. I mean, if you can't get your employer to match your drives or whatnot, then find a different employer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Michaela, just having a hard conversation. You're in a toxic environment. You need to, and it's a particular relationship, right? Any suggestions on how to have that conversation with that person?
Yeah, especially if you're somebody who, usually what it is somebody who you're not running to have the hard conversation, right? None of us are probably, usually delaying it, procrastinating it.
Yeah.
And one kind of exercise I use is kind of do the scale where you say everything you want to say with no filter, right? Just do that with your spouse, write it on a piece of paper where you're just like, get it all out, right? And then start to kind of whittle it back to say, okay, of that, what can I say, right? And maybe,
Yeah.
okay, let me word it a bit different. So that you're getting all of your thoughts, your emotions fully unfiltered out, and then you're able to kind of craft a maybe more. And then I say for sure, if you need to practice it with someone, script it out. I've had leaders that are like terrified to say anything, and I say script it out. Be that person. I've been that person before that's literally scripted it out, gone into the meeting with my paper and just said, also say the elephant in the room out of the gate. Hey, this is going to be a hard conversation. This is
Yeah.
doesn't feel easier to me. That's why I've taken the time to read it out. I don't want to misword anything because a lot of times too, what I see is they get in there if they haven't really crafted it. You're gonna sugarcoat it. You're gonna, oh, it's not right because you're uncomfortable. You don't want to offend and all the things.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah, that's good.
stop there. Yeah.
That's good advice, and I appreciate that. So, with that, I think we'll start to wrap this up. So, interestingly, you've written two books. Is that right?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
So, real quick. So the first one is 365 day a year devotional. So if
Nice.
you like a bit of a devotion and or your wife needs a little gift, there's that. And then also I kind of wrote this one during COVID. It's called Your Best Year Yet, but it's more of a reflective 52-week journal with questions that I had a team that was like, I need to build self-awareness with my team. And so this was
Okay.
actually part of the content with that. And then it was COVID, so I was bored. Well, not that bored, but so I was like, well, why don't I put this all into a book, right? And
Right.
so that is that. So yeah.
Okay. Well, so got a special kind of a surprise for you guys. So, for those that participated, Doug and Vern, you're each going to get copies of that book
There you go.
at Michaela's and ING's convenience. So those will be taken care of and sent out to you guys. So, easy for me to say. Appreciate oh my goodness gracious,
It's Friday.
participation.
He's done.
Yeah, you
He's
you
cooked.
aren't just kidding. All right, so let's just kind of wrap up Michaela's part of this. Michaela, how can they connect with you and reach to you?
Yeah, find me, Michaela Kate Schaefer, I think, on LinkedIn. My email is releasingyourvoice@gmail.com. Yeah, if anybody else wants books or resources, I'll send out this kind of information to resources, handouts to Beth and the team here, and they can shoot them over to you. So I'll have my email there too. So
Okay.
appreciate it, and happy Friday. Go Cyclones, go Jordan Spieth, and here we are.
All right. Well, we are wrapping it up. So I hope all you guys have a fabulous weekend.